going on, people? Welcome to my first ever tutorial on YouTube. Today I'm going to be cooking up some Stunna Gambino, Lil Tjay type beats. This is one of my favorite styles of beats to make. So for these beats, they're usually up-tempo, which is what I think makes them fire. So today we in double time, 185. You could go between, if you're in double time, you can go between 180 to 200. Or even a little higher than that. And then in halftime, you can go between 90 and like 105. First thing you got to do is load up a piano. That's like the basis for most of these loops, a piano or a guitar, but mainly a piano. So we're just gonna get started with some chords. A lot of times I like to start on this note. For the chords, you just skip one note in the scale and go down below the root note. This is actually a major chord, and I like to start there just to change things up instead of always starting on the root note. I'm gonna just use one of the progressions that I like to use a lot. You go from this chord down one semitone, and then you'd go up to the root note, and then you'd go one note below the root note. And you get a progression that sounds like this. So I'm actually hearing another chord over here. I think it's this chord right here. So I'm gonna add that. I use this progression a lot, like I said. So now I'm just gonna copy the bottom notes of the chords and paste them down one octave, and then randomize the velocities. So I like to randomize the velocities a lot, something like that, and then make them lower, give it a softer tone. For this one, I'm gonna invert this middle note. I find that usually gives it a sadder vibe. And then next thing I want to do is add a melody. So usually I just start with the chords, and then I'll add some passing notes in between each chord. And then after that, I'll add another top line. So let's do some passing notes. So when I'm making these like passing notes and stuff like that, I usually just trial and error, or I'll try to hear something in my head. I usually do like a mix of both. I'll click a note in, hear something, and just figure it out. There's no real formula for making melodies. The only rule pretty much is to stay in key. But other than that, there's no real rules. I would just go by ear, and you get better just by making lots of melodies. Alright, so now that I got that, I'm just gonna copy this over, and I'm gonna do a top line. So for these like top line melodies, these higher notes and stuff, I tend to do more repetitive stuff for this specific style of like pain. It gives it a more like sadder tone when you do repetitive notes over changing chord progression. And so here's what I came up with on this second half. I put the pitch down an octave because I think that was a little bit too high. So now we're gonna add some effects. Usually I'll just put a delay and reverb. My go-to reverb is Valhalla. I'm sure y'all have seen this everywhere. This is like the best reverb. And I usually just bring the low cut up and just turn the knob down. And then I'll add a fruity delay too. Put it on 4th step. Ping pong. Bring the volume down. And this is some sauce right here. Lots of people do this. Where if you have Effect Rack, you can go to the guitar section and the Crystal Choir preset. You'll hear this all the time on Pain Loops. I like to add that as well, and I usually like to turn it down a bit. So here's how the piano sounds with effects on it. Next thing I'm gonna add here is a synth bass, and this is my go-to synth bass for these types of loops. It's a stock Omnisphere sound, growler Moog bass. Yeah, I use this all the time. So I'm just gonna copy these bottom notes into the synth bass, put it in the 4th octave, and here's how that sounds. So next thing you want to add for these is usually a vocal sample, and I think this is what really puts everything together. So I got this from Splice right here. Definitely recommend using Splice Arcade, or you can use a vocal remover and just take songs off of YouTube. With the piano, this is dry, no effects, so it's gonna sound a little rough, but here's what we got. Yeah, so that definitely sounds super fire. Just need some effects. So usually when it comes to vocals, I'll put a reverb. So we're pulling up Valhalla again, bring it down, bring the low cut up, throw a delay on there, kind of like the piano. And then lastly, I'll throw a an EQ. Sometimes I like to click this radio preset, and that gives it a little filter to give it some room. So here's how it sounds with effects. Yeah, so that sounds super fire. I really like that vocal. Last thing I usually like to add for these kinds of loops is a tom-tom. And you know, you can find these in various different drum kits. Some trap kits have them. The way I like to use these is using them like a kick and a snare. So I have one low note that acts like a kick, and then the high notes will be like a snare. And then for the counter snare, I'll do an even higher note. So here's how that sounds. So I bounced the loop out and I dragged it into a new project, and we're gonna get started on the drums. These beats, I usually like to keep the drums pretty simple and let the melody carry. So for the hi-hats is what kind of makes the drums for these beats kind of unique, is they usually go with a spaced out pattern with like pauses. It's not the regular 2-step most of the time. They usually go with a pattern something like this, where it's like space in between each one. And I feel like that gives it a lot of bounce. So yeah, it's real simple. I'm just gonna add some stutters to spice it up. For the 808, I'm gonna just grab the good old spins, all the root notes. For this, you also want a more spaced out pattern. That's kind of the key for the drums for these types of beats. Lots of space. So. Alright, next thing I'm gonna add here is just a counter snare. So I'm gonna just grab one of my go-tos, just a typical trap snare. So at the end here, I'm gonna add some snare rolls just by cutting this up. Alt U to chop it, make it stutter, and then I'm gonna slope the velocities like that by right clicking. That's fire. So now I'm just gonna put the finishing touches, just add maybe an open hat and like a perk, and that'll be it for the beat. The open hats I usually like to use them to emphasize the 808s by placing them on top of like where an 808 is. So usually on the 1 I put one, and then I'll do something like this. I also like to shorten them by turning up the out knob. I usually don't add kicks to these kinds of beats, but I think for this one I want a kick, so I'm just gonna copy the 808 into this kick and Alt K. Layering a kick with the 808, I highly recommend that you mess around with the pitch until you find something that sounds good, because sometimes it won't sound too good if the kick is at a pitch that doesn't like really go with the 808. Boom, so that's it for this tutorial. Hope y'all enjoyed this. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what y'all want me to do next. If you want to flip this loop, the link is in the description. And if you want more loops like this, I got kits out on my site. We'll definitely go check the links in the description. So hope y'all enjoyed. Let me know if y'all want to see more of this type of content. Peace.